discuss today is the Victrix Throne chambered in 375 CheyTac. Now this is arguably one of the most popular ELR extreme long-range cartridges out on the market. This thing is absolutely phenomenal, and if you run the numbers in ballistics apps, it is extremely capable of reaching out and touching steel or hard targets at distance. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be looking at my low development. Fun fact, this rifle is available in 375 CheyTac as well as 408 CheyTac, and for both of these, you can actually buy factory ammunition. Now, full disclosure, you probably need to have godlike money in order. I don't think God actually ever had money, but you need a lot of money to be able to buy factory ammo for extreme long range. And as you guys know, there's many advantages to crafting your own ammo, and cost saving is only one of those advantages. We can now obviously fine tune a specific bullet combo, powder, primer, everything to work in your rifle. And that is what we're gonna be doing in today's video. We're gonna be looking at my range session. And obviously, spoiler alert, if you watch the first few seconds of this video, you would have seen the results we got. So let's have a look at some of the results we got, the recipe we finally ended up settling on before we take this puppy out and hit steel at 2 kilometers in the next episode. If you guys want to see that, make sure you leave a like, a comment on this video, please. It really helps drive the algorithm, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also, if you never want to miss out one of my videos again, there is going to be a link to sign up to our mailing list down below, so you get an email in your inbox the second we release a new video. So let's have a look at some shooting, and then we'll run through the components and what we ended up settling on. All right, how do we like this for a gangster setup? What? Now, there were some factors that led into my decision to get the Victrix Throne over its, I guess, brother, which would be the Victrix Crown, which essentially to the untrained eye looks the same. There's one big difference. The Throne is magazine fed, okay? So you get this gigantic magazine. And the reason I went for the Throne is because of the magazine, because with extreme long range shooting, the variables are so extreme, okay? Or let me rephrase that. The slight change in a variable like the wind condition or temperature or, just a little bit of mirage changing direction has an extreme effect on your bullet as it goes through flight over these kind of distance, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, potentially even 4 kilometers. And my school of thought was, if I was able to shoot out of a magazine, I do have that ability to shoot quickly, because so often in matches I've done very well at these long range matches because I have that ability to, once I see where my shot lands, make a rapid adjustment and try and get another round in the air in similar conditions. Now, one could argue, and we've actually seen this on the channel, is that you do have enough time theoretically to single load. So if you squeeze off a good round, you can rack the bolt, pick up another bullet, throw it in the chamber, close the bolt, roundabout by the time your bullet lands at these kind of distances. However, there is a downside. Now all of a sudden you could be so focused on racking your bolt that you compromise on some of your fundamentals to squeeze off a good long range shot, and that's obviously not going to work, because then you're building in another variable by like a bad trigger pull. So we want to obviously eliminate as much of those variables as possible. Now let's have a look at our components. So first of all, we used Bertram brass for this project. The brass is ridiculously expensive for these ELR cartridges. However, if you size and things correctly, they should last a good while. Obviously, I'm also going to use my Annealing Made Perfect machine to make sure I get consistent neck tension when we load these the second time round. So that is absolutely vital, extends your brass life and leaves you with consistency, because consistency is ultimately the name of the game with extreme long range shooting. We want to do everything in our power to make sure that our standard deviation is as low as possible, because a standard deviation of like 15-20 feet per second results in you hitting like a complete target low at these kind of distances we're shooting. So Bertram brass. Then I settled on some Berger 379 grain monolithic bullets. Okay, these things are lathe turned solid bullets and they look absolutely phenomenal. Now, one of the things we have to keep in mind when you're shooting solid bullets, okay, because copper is lighter or less dense than lead, they actually are lighter for a like material. So the only way to make the bullet heavier is to therefore make the bullet longer. So there's actually only a tiny bearing surface on the back of this bullet. Otherwise you might have too much friction down the barrel. And because the bullet is now longer, it potentially needs to be pushed deeper into your case. And this was one of the limitations we ran into. I did drill and tap a case, which is over here, so that I could measure sort of our optimal seating depth that this rifle would really like to operate in, because I can now manipulate that, okay, and then take an ogive measurement. But because we went for the thrown and we're shooting it out of the magazine, that was kind of one of our limitations, and we ended up just settling on a load that was optimized for magazine length. And I optimized it so much that there's actually like a slight little cut in the front of this magazine as some of these monolithic bullets have gone in there. But I was able to successfully shoot it from the magazine, as you guys will see in part 3, as you will also see in this low development footage. So I have heard that some people have struggled to get these 379 grain solids to work. They have, however, worked phenomenally well for me, as you guys will be able to see. It's also worth noting that in part 3 of this series, when I went out to shoot 2 and 3 kilometers, that I did double check this group that we ended up settling with, and I just fine adjusted 0. Also something to keep in mind, when we're doing low development, I am not concerned at shooting out the center of the X at all. That is not the purpose of low development. I merely want to look at what the group looks like, because if the group looks good, and I still have that fine aiming point where I'm shooting at, so usually I would purposefully add a click or two high so that I'm shooting slightly above where I'm aiming, because once you blow out the aiming point, that kind of builds in another bit of that variable where you're holding on the exact same place. So don't be too concerned when you see people's low development targets and the impacts are actually slightly off the X. But I think we're well enough established in the shooting community here, and we've done our best to educate you guys with why that really doesn't matter. Okay, then all of this was propelled by Vitavuri N570. Now I tell you what, these cartridges are incredibly, let's call it thirsty. This is the V8, okay, V8 Land Cruiser of rifles. 130 grains plus of powder went into some of these cases. I think our final load was 137, which is absolutely incredible, okay? That's 4 times the amount of powder I put into one dasher bullet, okay? crazy. So to watch the powder drain on the Matchmaster was quite soul crushing because obviously on the channel we're still buying all of our consumables and stuff. Then also primer wise, I went for a Federal Gold Medal Match Magnum primer in this. All of the ammo was loaded using RCBS equipment, RCBS scales as far as we can. The only thing we didn't use RCBS was our actual seating die. I used a custom seating die with my Arbor press. Okay, so that covers our components. Now let's have a look at some of the results we got. Now I had a GoPro which I jerry-rigged onto the indoor shooting range target and I sent it downrange. And luckily nobody shot it, okay, because this is my second time I've been there and people were shooting on my target. So luckily nobody hit my GoPro. It's also worth noting that our GoPro's battery eventually died because I did take my time in between shooting these strings because obviously burning 130 grains of a powder, I don't want to burn out the throat of this rifle. So our first group was 132 grains of N570 with that 379 grain projectile. Our speed was 3,037 feet per second with a standard deviation of 12.4. So that's really good. Keep in mind, we need that low standard deviation to really know that we have that long range consistency, which we're after. 133 grains yielded a speed of 3,054 feet per second with a standard deviation of only 5. Okay, so single digit standard deviation. Then we went to 134, also shot an okay-ish group, like an MOA size group there, standard deviation 17. At 135 grains, our group started opening up a little bit, which meant we're probably exiting a node before we'd find another node. But this was on the heavy side of the powder charge, and I was unlikely to choose a load in this sort of upper range because a speed of over 3,000 feet per second with almost 380 grain projectile is absolutely bananas, okay? It's wild. Then we had 136 was 3,107 speed, standard deviation of 9, which is really good. And then 137 also group didn't look great, and I'll show you guys some video of the group here. And the speed on that was 1,324 with a standard deviation of 11.9. So, needless to say, it was quite an easy decision based on what the group size looked like and the standard deviation to pick that 133 grain load. I went, revalidated that, shot another great group. Unfortunately, I didn't get video of that. And then I decided, okay, let's load them up and head out to 2 kilometers, which you guys will see in the following episode. So I'm super stoked with the performance of this rifle. Keep in mind, a little group like that is not easy to shoot with a big cartridge. I eventually got comfortable and I was actually able to shoot this indoors, which was super loud. So I recommend if you're shooting indoors with a muzzle brake, regardless. When you're shooting indoors, it's much louder. So I double plug the most. I put foam ear things in, and then I have my big peltors over that just for extra hearing protection. Eventually I was comfortable enough to shoot this rifle, okay, on the MDT double pull bipod. Okay, and it was sliding nice back, but I was actually able to start shooting this comfortably and keeping both eyes open during the shot process, which for an ELR 375 CheyTac is awesome. Now, people ask me, Pete, what is the recoil like? It's actually not bad. Like, it really isn't bad at all. It's more of a push. I think it did help that the surface is nice and slick, so the rifle was able to glide easily on that. Possibly it would have been even better if the surface was sort of tacky and the rifle was able to stick better. But being a behemoth of a rifle with a massive diameter 38-inch pipe on this, there's a lot of weight in the system, okay? And the weight is obviously your friend if you're recoil sensitive. So over the moon with the results we got with the initial load development. A couple of things, the scope is possibly a little bit too low. It barely touches, but I'm gonna leave it as is because it is zeroed and I'm happy days, and we took it out to 3 kilometers in the next video. So subscribe if you guys wanna see that. Out of 10, I am absolutely stoked with the load development. Now, something we've noted on the channel before, shooting a tiny group like we did, okay, keep in mind the group is about the size of the bullet diameter, so that's really, really good. That's only a small part of the equation for getting success at long range because there's so many other variables that play such a large factor, okay? So the tiny group, that for me is a huge mental win when I know I'm going out to distance. That means because I'm going to be able to spot for myself, hopefully I can see where my shots land and we can make some corrections on that, because ultimately that plays is a large portion of long range shooting. So the group doesn't have to be super crazy tiny in order to have success and a high hit percentage at long range. Anyway guys, that is a wrap for our low development on the Victrix Throne. I'm absolutely impressed. I'm also impressed that the MDT Skypod is able to handle such a behemoth of a rifle. I do believe when we go out for the next range trip, I'm going to be stepping up the bipod just to get even bigger, even wider, and even more fine control on the bipod, because this Skypod's not actually designed for that. Now guys, I'm also building a custom 416 Hellfire, which MDT are going to do a chassis for, which I'm super pumped. So we'll see how that project comes out. If you're shopping for chassis and stuff like that, head on over to mdttac.com. I also want to thank them for sponsoring the channel. Even though this is a Victrix rifle, that helps me cover the cost of the extreme cost. Okay, I actually haven't done the math about what it costs to shoot this thing, but them being a sponsor of the channel has helped a ton for that. So if you guys want to support them, please head on over to mdttac.com, and they've been a massive player and helping us do really cool things like this. Okay, guys, see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Victrix, thanks for knocking it out the park of this rifle. I cannot wait to see what we do next.
Yes, baby!